Welcome back, everybody, to this episode of Pivotal Change. I am really excited for tonight's episode because we're going to take a deep dive into some of those things that are really universal for everyone as a leader, somebody who wants to be influential, is running a business, or just a team. And we're going to work through that. We're going to visit into mindset, a little bit of marketing, and then the 7 principles of leadership that I try to help broadcast to everyone that's in any kind of leadership position. We're going to talk all about those tonight. The fun part is that it again applies to everyone. So if you are on a team, you're maybe low man on the totem pole, just getting your first chunk of responsibilities, or you're running multi-million and billion-dollar businesses, it all is relative to you. So here's another cool part about it is that we get to have this discussion be ongoing over time. So I'm going to introduce to you just pieces of everything tonight, give you the overview, and then harp on them one at a time in more detail as we go. But one thing that has been broadcast to me throughout my upbringing as a child, as an athlete, as a person that was pursuing various careers, in my law enforcement, in my SWAT training, in my other dynamic training, and then in my entrepreneurial career, running multiple businesses and helping people run theirs, something has truly risen to the surface. The most successful people in all of those categories aren't just the most talented. They aren't just the most charismatic or the most intelligent. There's something about all of them that we can relate to is they have a mindset. They have an attitude that is different than most others of their contemporaries that do not pass snuff, that do not make the success, that do not figure things out and have to revert back to something different. So I have a system that I help people put in place called the 5 M's. And the first and foremost, in order, on purpose, in the first slot is mindset. There's some great comments out there that you can learn and get some quotes and interviews from famous coaches, famous athletes, famous businessmen. And there's so much you can just Google, YouTube, wherever it is to find out more about mindset. But I'm going to give you just another 10 or 12 minutes here about my take on mindset and how it applies most specifically to you in your business world, in your relationships, in your network, and ultimately your life. So mindset is part of the 5 M's, as I've mentioned. So there's mindset first, and then there's materials. Just briefly on materials, it's what it actually takes for you to run your business. What are you selling, a product or service? And what are all the background things, both hard and soft, like the actual raw materials, the goods, the retail items, all the way to the softwares and the phone lines and the internet service. And then the personnel. What are the materials it takes for you to run your business? The third M is a really good one because it's methodology. And this is a place that I find when consulting people that things really break down. Stuff gets done, you get A to B somehow, but it's not organized, it's not tracked, it's not consistent, it's not universal. And so we work a lot on methodology. How are you going to make the sale? How are you going to make the product? How are you going to deliver the product? How are you going to get the recurring customer? How are you going to track, follow up, ship? Whatever it is, there is a methodology or a trick or a tactic to everything. The next one is really important. One of my favorites, even though it's not in the first spot, but that is mentorship. And mentorship happens 3 ways. It happens internally first. You got to look at yourself first and mentor yourself, become wise, become intelligent, become skilled, become capable. After mentorship, you need to mentor others to grow them up to be like you and capable like you so they can eventually replace you and you can become a better future version of yourself as a leader. After the mentorship, we continue into things like mentoring your clients, mentoring your third-party relationships and your potential customers. And the last one is measured growth. So there's 2 prongs to the measured growth. One is that you actually grow too fast. You have rapid success, you get those growing pains, but things start to break down because you have not measured and paced yourself. I know we want that line to drive up and to the right, but if it drives up and to the right too fast, it ends up crashing. And the other part of measured growth is that you want to make sure that your people are growing and that you're forcing yourself to grow and expand and become either more diverse or more specialized or just more dominant in your industry. So let's circle on back to mindset. Mindset is the most important because what you need to realize is that in any business or in any conversation, you're ultimately not selling a product. You're not even selling yourself or an idea to a team or a process. What you're really selling to be the most successful is you're selling value. Why is what you are bringing up, mentioning, working on selling, why is that valuable to the person that you are targeting for this conversation? So in order to do that, you have to realize that you are valuable. You possess something that is a resource that you cannot get back, and that is time. And you need to have the mindset that my time is valuable. I am valuable. I provide a skill, a product, or a consultation, whatever it is, that maybe nobody else can do, not exactly like me. There's only one of you. You are unique, you are valuable, and so is your time. So if we have the mindset of now delivering value, price is almost never an issue. I want you to hear that again. If you can get the perceived value across, price is almost never an issue. So I want you to think about that. What are 2 or 3 things that you should be doing every day to demonstrate and produce at your highest value? If you are not doing those 2 or 3 high value things, 60, 70, 80% of your time that you're actually working, you're really diminishing your own value. And I really hate that for a lot of people. We get caught in administrative stuff, follow ups, little gritty tasks. We get into the common trap that happens to everybody is that we are supposed to work on what is important, what is the priority for as long as we can until the urgent gets in the way. Well, what I see is that the urgent is almost always in the way. So the prioritizing, the mindset of having value, your time needs to be spent a specific way in a specific capacity at a highest billable service. That's what we need to check ourselves into our value. So I'm going to challenge you while watching this episode. If you've watched previous episodes, I want this to be more of an interaction, not just between me and the guests, but me and you in your living room or at your desk. I want you to be able to take notes and write things down. So I want to challenge you. What are those 2 or 3 things that you should be working on every day to achieve your highest value, your best use? And I want you to write that down, take notes, and then I want you to go examine your schedule and your calendar 1, 2, 3 weeks out and see how much time do I really have allotted, blacked out to make sure I'm working on my highest value. The next thing is you need to see that you can actually bill for value. Okay. We often think of ourselves in this mostly capitalistic society as a transactional business, as a transactional society that I just need to secure this one sale and then maybe I can bring them back. But there's a higher value. I just need to sell the product plus a 20 or 30% markup to make my profit, to get my margins, to make sure I cover my overhead and move on. But there's more to it than that. You can actually bill for value. And here is a common thing that I like to tell people about. And this is one of the best demonstrations of mindset that I can think of. So you have Picasso. Picasso was one of the rare artists that was famous in his lifetime. He did not have to die first to become famous. And so he was known throughout Paris and France and one in Italy and everywhere he traveled. But he was sitting at a street side cafe one day. And this is a real story, and I encourage everyone to look it up. And what happens is a high society woman of the town recognized him sitting there having his morning cafe. She approached him and said, "Sorry to interrupt, but I'm a huge fan of yours. And as a huge fan of yours, I would love, please, create for me a work. Create for me some piece of work that I may have something from you to take home." And the humble Picasso said, "I'm just eating my cafe, ma'am. I'm sorry. No, I'd rather just eat my cafe." So she continued to insist. And Picasso gave in and he took a napkin and he lays the napkin out and he pulls out a pen and he draws only for a few moments and he creates a picture of a dove. And he presents it to this dove and he goes, "Here you go, ma'am. This is a dove of mine. That will be $500. Now, think about this for a second. Back in his timeline, $500 would have been a small fortune. That'd be like somebody handing us saying, "Hey, give me 5 or 10 grand." And so this woman was shocked, aghast, had to catch her breath and said, "Well, how dare you charge me for $500 what took you only a moment to create?" And he said, "Ma'am, you misunderstand. This dove did not take me but a moment, but my entire lifetime to be able to create this art." Picasso understood his value. Picasso understood that his unique presentation of art and images and the skill sets developed over time was much more important than what he could have charged just $1 for on a napkin. He knew his value. And you, as every person in the room, need to know your value. You can't hold your mindset of value of yourself as a hostage tool to hold clients hostage or get exorbitant fees. But the other thing I'd like to give is I give tax advice all the time. And if I examine somebody's situation and I look at their scenario and I say, "Oh, wow, here's a glaring issue. Here's a hole in the tax law that they are not using. This is a great spot for them to have huge tax savings, to increase their best practices and reduce their liability. And they may have called me for just a quick question, but I will tell them that, hey, it took me years and years and years to learn the amount of knowledge that it took to recognize that and to articulate it to you and then follow through and help you implement it. So all of that work may have only taken a 15-minute phone call, maybe an hour's worth of follow-up. So is an hour and 15, an hour and a half of my time and maybe an employee or two, that might be worth a couple few $100 if you're billing on the hourly rate. But I just did something that was a $60,000 maneuver that saved you $20,000 in tax. Is it really appropriate for me, if I know my value, to charge $200, $300 for the work to get done when you had a $20,000 tax saving that will replicate itself year after year for you? No, there's value in that conversation. And there's value in the mindset that I can do something that your other accountant wasn't doing, your other consultant wasn't doing. And you can do the same thing in your field. So I want you to recognize your value and start getting your materials based around your mindset of value, getting your methodology based around your mindset of value. Your mentorship programs and your growth programs, your measured growth programs, all need to be based around value. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring on a guest here after the break, and we're going to move on to a little bit more pivot into mindset. We're going to specifically talk about marketing and some of the scary parts of marketing, some of the fun parts of marketing, expensive or cheap, organic versus timing. And a lot of that has to do with mindset and the ability to produce yourself, represent your brand, get your name out there, and know that you can then sell value to your clients. So stick with me after this break, and we'll have our next guests on, and we're going to have a great conversation. And then we'll move further in the night with discussing more about leadership and how some of this can unfold. Stay tuned. We are back from the break. It's me, your host, Ryan Conn, for Pivotal Change. And we just had a great conversation about mindset and the mindset of having value. And we're going to do what we like to do here, and that's pivot. And we're going to come in and jump into a topic about marketing. And I have with me today a very good friend of mine, Janel Sykora of Cajabra. Now, she is a marketing guru. If you've ever seen any of my online videos or anything that I do, I always claim not to be the marketing guru. I may know enough to be dangerous and give you a quick little piece of advice, but this right here, this is the woman that I get and I use as my expert. So, Janel, pleasure to have you on here again. Thank you for coming back. How are you doing this evening? And again, thank you for joining us.
Hi, Ryan. Thank you so much for having me on. My name is Janel Sykora. I'm the co-founder of Cajabra. You can find my website at www.cajabra.com. I've been in sales and marketing for 30 years at this point, and Cajabra is a full service marketing agency.
Awesome, Janelle. That's great. And one thing that I want to do is I like to jump right in since we're always up against a break. And I have just a few questions for you tonight. And the first question that I have for you is just generally speaking, marketing. And I'm going to put quotes around that because I think a lot of people have a different idea of how big that bucket is and how diverse marketing can actually be. And I think when people do look at that, it becomes kind of overwhelming for them or their business, especially if they're new to this adventure. Maybe they've never done marketing before. They just don't know where to start. So one thing that I want to do is jump right in. Where would you recommend for someone in this situation, newer to the game of marketing or newer to the business, where would you recommend that they actually jump in and start?
You know what, Ryan, that's a great question. I get that question frequently, and I would say there are three places that you want to start. First, the most important thing that you want to do is really identify who your ideal client is. You should really have an understanding of who that client is, both from a demographic standpoint, but also from what's inside their psyche. What are the key problems, their biggest pain points that they have as it relates to your services? You should understand what success looks like for them. You should be able to understand what they want, what their biggest fears are. And you should also be able to very clearly articulate how they do business with you. And that kind of leads into the second thing I would recommend, in addition to identifying who your key or your main avatar is, or your ideal audience. You need to craft a good message. And that's very important. I think many brands and many companies don't pay enough attention to that. It's extremely important to craft a very clear, not clever, clear message that also differentiates you. And that if you're in an industry where there's a lot of competition, we'll call that sort of a red ocean, you want to make sure that you are presenting your products and services in a very differentiated way, and that you've got, again, clear and compelling messaging that resonates with your ideal audience. And then I would say the third thing that I would do in terms of where to start with that marketing overwhelm, if you will, is focus on your digital presence. Everyone is digital today. And when I say focus on your digital presence, I really mean a couple of things. One, make sure you've got a decent website, a professional looking website, and then make sure that you have claimed your Google business profile. It's way too often overlooked, but it will definitely help optimize you in Google's eyes. And having an optimized Google business profile, will drive traffic to your website. So I would say those three places would be where I'd start. Identify who your ideal client is. Make sure that you craft very specific and clear messaging in terms of how you deliver your products and services, and then set up your digital presence.
Okay, that is very good, helpful information. So I'm going to just keep pushing this along though, and jump straight into the next question. Thank you very much for that. I'm excited to see how that might play out for some of our viewers. Question number two. So not just necessarily for the new person, but just for anyone who's on a budget. What are the best forms of like a lower cost or even cheaper or free version of marketing? Can you go across some of those for us?
Yeah, that's a great question too. Not everybody comes out of the gates ready to spend a lot of money on paid advertising, as an example. So I would usually tell people start with what I would call forms of organic marketing. In other words, things that you can do that will have a slower build, but that they will put you on the right trajectory to get there, to add one client, then two, then three. And those types of things would be, for instance, once you've identified who your ideal client is and you've crafted your messaging, find out where do they hang out online? Are they on LinkedIn? Is this the type of ideal client that spends more time on Instagram? Really go deep in understanding what channels your ideal client looks to. Maybe your ideal client is on YouTube all the time. Pick one or two of those social media channels and plan out a content strategy. Batch your content, plan it out for a week or two at a time at least, because that makes it a lot more, it makes it a lot easier for you to A, do and get done, and B, commit to a cadence on that. And C, it lets you feel like that it isn't completely hijacking your time if you sit down and batch it, once every week or once every 2 weeks. Another thing that I recommend to people who are looking for ways to market, content marketing is very, very important. So two other notes that I would say would be spend some time on video. And there are so many people who hate being on video. I get it. I'm one of them. It took me a long time to overcome that. But people do video converts. So I would focus on YouTube. YouTube is the second largest search engine to Google. Just start putting content out there. It's going to be terrible at first. You are your worst critic. Remember that, but just keep doing it. Commit to that. And then the last thing that I would say is, if you have a website with a blog, and you're one of the people who loves to blog, I can't really underscore that enough, how important a blog really still is, from the standpoint that a good strategy with a blog is to literally sit down and brainstorm 10, 20, 30 questions that your ideal clients ask or would ask you on a continuing basis. Those questions need to be the topic for a blog post. So one blog post for each question. Answer the questions. That is how Google will find you eventually. Eventually that will index. And once you've got enough blog posts out there, when people type those questions into the search engine, the hope is that they land on your blog. But you have to have a lot of content out there to do that. But those are some ways that you can get started, mainly creating content that don't cost you any money if you're not working with a marketing expert. You can do those things yourself.
Okay, interesting, interesting. So I know I've used some of those in the past, and I know you've made recommendations like that to me and some of our contemporaries. So I'm gonna push back in this advertising. I want to know a little bit more about advertising. How would a business owner know what channels to advertise through? Can you go a little bit more in detail about what channels they should be advertising into and how to do it, please?
Yeah, that's another good one, and I get that all the time because that's scary, right? I think I want to spend money on advertising, but where do I spend it? How much do I spend? And what I tell people kind of goes back to what I said a minute ago. Where is your ideal client hanging out? Are they watching shows digitally? Are they watching TV? Are they listening to radio? Are they listening to satellite radio? Are they online most of the time? Are they on YouTube? And then, think about testing first, doing some, and this is when you get into any paid advertising, you really want to work with a professional. If you're going to advertise on radio, for example, most radio stations have and television stations have professionals who can guide you. If you're looking for more online digital advertising, that's very, very important to work with a professional marketing agency because marketing agencies like mine can tell people this is the right type of ad strategy for you. Maybe it's social media, maybe it's Google. They're both very, very different. And most of us who've been doing this for a while can guide companies on exactly how much to spend and what results might look like. Now, there's another, I want to just draw a distinction between what you'll hear as a term called PPC or pay-per-click and SEO. Sometimes people kind of confuse those terms. And SEO is it is also a paid strategy. It's not necessarily advertising, but it is a strategy where you can identify specific keywords and then work to optimize, like to drive traffic to your website based on those keywords. And that isn't necessarily paid advertising. That is a search engine optimization campaign. Pay per click is more of a paid advertising. So that would be like your social media advertising or your Google type advertising. Very different strategies. But ideally, if you're looking at online advertising at all, I would advise at least speaking with a marketing professional before you try and tackle that on your own. That's a little trickier.
Okay, interesting, interesting. So some of those people may have never heard of or thought of before, and hopefully we can start putting that on our radar to start using a lot of the recommendations you're giving us here. This is really, really good stuff. Thank you very much for that. I just have maybe a couple more questions for you before we get close to wrapping up our period here and having to jump into another break. But one of the big questions is if I'm marketing, if I'm advertising, how do I know that it's actually working? I'm getting a return on my investment. What can you measure in terms of ROI? Can you cover that for us?
So I want to draw a big distinction here. There's a big difference between marketing and sales. I lived in the sales world for most of my career until I moved into marketing on my own. Sales is very easy to measure because there's ROI attached to if I sell this much, I make this much, I bring in this much revenue, right? That's easy. It's numbers. Marketing is very different. Now, in terms of ROI, what I tell people is if you're just getting started and you're working on a marketing professional or you're working with a marketing company or marketing professional and you're investing money in, say, a website, a content strategy, or managing your marketing strategy, et cetera. Those are things that are going to be a little bit harder to measure in terms of ROI because you're not going to be able to say, okay, I got these 6 clients from my website necessarily. It just makes it a little bit trickier. And it's very, very important to have that professional brand presence and the right messaging and the right social media strategy, the right content strategy. But that makes it a little bit harder to measure your ROI initially. You will be able to see over time a difference. However, where you can really measure ROI effectively is if you are doing SEO or you are doing some sort of paid advertising, especially online paid advertising. You should be able to identify exactly the leads that converted that came to you through that paid advertising. And with SEO, you should be able to identify changes in traffic patterns. So again, very different ways of measuring ROI between marketing and sales. And sometimes there's the misconception that if I spend this money on building my brand, well, then I should see this type of a return. And that is true to an extent. It gets a little tricky and a little muddy to measure that when you're focused on building content and building your brand. Does that make sense?
Okay, good deal, Janelle. Thank you. That's going to be good because, like you know, in some of my 5 M's, measured growth is very good. Last question for the evening, and then we'll end up pushing into our break because we do have that break in the commercial. We have to do marketing for us as well. So, how do you know when you should just try things organically and on your own, or how do you know when you should use a marketing expert? Is there a trigger point? Are there telltale signs? Can you jump in on when we should know that we should work with a marketing expert like you?
Okay, so that's another really good question. Here's what I would say. When you own a business, at first, myself, like all of you who are watching, you want to do everything, right? You want to kind of track your expenses, track your income, manage your books, do your marketing, do whatever it is that you went into business to do, pick the software stack that makes sense for you, your tech stack. However, you can't do everything. And at such point where you get busy, you have to realize that your time is the most valuable time in your entire business. So at such time that you can sit back and think about that and think, okay, I need to grow somehow, some way. You need to think about where you need to fill in those gaps and where you need to outsource to a professional. I think that you absolutely 100% need to invest in a good accountant advisor. That's a must. That's just table stakes. And then I think when you want to grow your business and grow your brand, that's a really good time to invest in a marketing professional. But again, not one who's just going to say, oh, you need to do paid advertising, or oh, you need to do this. Someone who takes the time to really listen and understand, what are your goals? Like, what are your goals this year? What are your goals in the next 6 months? And then is able to create a strategy that aligns with those goals, not someone who's just trying to push a product or push a service.
Okay, valid points, all valid points. So, Janelle, big question. I want you to tell us a little bit about yourself because one thing that I did know, and of course I know even more now, is that you are a marketing expert and guru, just like you're able to explain all these things to us. What if somebody wanted to contact you specifically and say, hey, Janelle, I want you to become my marketing expert, my marketing guru? How could people get a hold of you? Where could they find you?
Yeah, thank you for asking that, Ryan. So I love to connect with people on LinkedIn. So please hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm Janel Sykora, JANEL SYKORA. Find me on LinkedIn, or my partner Brad and I have a website. It's Cajabra.com. And if you wanted to schedule a short little quick strategy session with me, no pressure, no obligation, at the very top on the right-hand side is a blue button that says schedule a no pressure call. Feel free to do that. Book some time with me directly, and I'll be happy to have a conversation.
Awesome. Very good deal. So I hope everyone has the chance that if they need somebody just like Janelle, which I highly recommend and think that you do, you know where to find her. You stay tuned with us though, because we're going to be coming back from this next break and we're going to be talking more specifically about influential leadership, and marketing is a good way to get your leadership broadcasted out there. So we'll be returning right after this break with more wonderful information on pivotal change. Stay tuned. As promised, we're back. Thank you for staying tuned through the commercial break. And we just had a great conversation with Janelle about marketing, and we've talked about some mindset and value. And now we're going to jump into two of the pillars back to back over the closing out of this episode of the 7 principles of leadership. But first, I want to tell you what all of those 7 principles are, and then we'll talk at them one at a time. The first thing I want to let you do is that all of these 7 principles stand on a foundation. So if you want to think of them as pillars or columns, these principles stand on a foundation of servant leadership. The greatest leader in the history of the world was a servant before all other things. And so that's what all leadership is ultimately built on: service. You're serving to get the best resources, best efforts, best everything that you can to your clients, to your staff, to your people, to your constituents, to your third parties, to the family that you're supporting. You should be a servant first. So keep that context in mind as we discuss some of these 7 principles of leadership. So the first principle of the 7 is to be humble. So think about that in line with service. You should be humble, not banging your own drum or tooting your own horn to try to get the attention for an act of service that you might do. The next one is to be a passionate visionary. And the word passionate is on purpose because a lot of us are visionaries, but the passionate, that adjective has a key component in one of the ways that the principles play out. The next one is to set clear expectations and boundaries. Clear expectations and boundaries. And out of all the 7 principles of leadership, this one probably provides the most clarity than all of the other ones and really diffuses future friction. Okay. The next one is to give permissions. Giving permissions. Human beings often act or don't act in certain ways because they don't know what permissions they have. So that principle of leadership also jumps in to a lot of misconfusion, but also a lot of freedom for leaders and owners as well. Another one is to teach people how to find the answers. Teach them how to find the answers. Don't just give them the answers. Don't just expect them to do it all on their own, but teach them how to find the answers. The 5th principle is to create influence on your team. So if you want to be an influential leader by having these 7 principles, you also need to create influence on the teams and the people that you're leading. That's usually a very missed concept for a lot of people. Number 6 is, as a leader, you need to seek out and surround yourself with the right advisors. Surround yourself with the right advisors, and there's categories of advisors, and certainly you do not want them to be all yes men or yes women. You need a diversity. And the 7th principle of leadership is to roll up your sleeves and get in the trenches. Now, I obviously talk about a lot of getting out of operations and working on your business and not in your business, but rolling up your sleeves and getting in the trenches is still something that's super important, has to be done from time to time. So jumping back to the top here, I want us to go ahead and dive into Be Humble. And I'm going to lead us off with telling you a little story from my childhood. See, I grew up and I was a wrestler. I still like wrestling and I still do martial arts and grappling, and I'm a wrestling coach. And wrestling is just a form of who I am, a part of who I am. So when I was in high school, one of the big expectations, or I should say opportunities for high school wrestlers, was to then coach the younger leagues, the youth leagues and the middle school leagues. And what was fun about that is you now got your first dose of leadership, of being your own version of a coach. As a high school wrestler, we had a home tournament where teams from all over the area would come in for a youth event. And we were the umpires, the referees, the table workers. We were the support staff, all of the high school wrestlers. And then all of the parents and all the kids came in with their teams, and we had a tournament for the day. Well, the tournaments can run pretty long. They usually start at 9 in the morning, then maybe go to 4 or 5 o'clock at night. It is a commitment. And during that time, there's little breaks, and we had a break during one of our sessions so that the referees and everybody could go get some lunch. And what happened was very interesting is that people know each other from around the region. And one dad, who was a very powerful, big, puffed up guy, now that I have adult knowledge, I know that he weighed at least 260 to 280. He was a power lifter, big barrel chest, huge arms, just a very strong statured man. And he was very brazen. He ended up getting into conversations about wrestling and exhibitions, and hey, let's fill this downtime with some excitement. And hey, why don't we do some exhibitions? I'll wrestle somebody. Let's pick somebody to wrestle. It doesn't matter who it is. I'll wrestle anybody in the room. And you kind of get the feeling that he was doing the whole Goliath thing, challenging from the Philistine army to the Israelite army, saying, give me anybody, give me your best warrior, I'll fight them all. That's what this guy looked like, this big hulk of a man sitting here calling out to the crowd, give me somebody to wrestle. Well, the funny part is there's a man that became my head coach not but a year later, largely because of the demonstration that he committed in this, that he performed in this event. See, this guy had been coming around and he was nothing impressive to look at. You know, he had some fairly thick glasses and just a very standard haircut. And he wore very modest, normal clothes. And he actually had a little bit of a gangly gait about him. He would swing his arms a little heavy. He was very loose in his features. And if you looked at the man, you just would not see intimidation. You would not see power, speed, and athleticism. Now, he was not a pushover. You could tell he probably did some exercise. But comparing the two men side by side was quite the contrast. Well, he ends up standing up and saying, hey, I don't mind. I'll wrestle the guy. There's a little bit of a snicker and a chuckle from the crowd because this was a mismatch. He might weigh 165, 170 pounds. There's probably 100-pound discrepancy, and this guy looks like he should be painted green and called the Hulk. Okay, this is a big boy. Well, he says, I don't mind. I'll wrestle him. Let's do the exhibition. And they're like, well, hey, man, you're wearing blue jeans and a plaid button up, and this guy's in his gym clothes. You can't wrestle like that. And he goes, oh, no problem. I've got my shoes and my gear in my truck. I'll be right back. Well, in my old profession in law enforcement, that's what we would call a clue. Clue number one is who drives around with their wrestling gear with them. And this guy was like a 30, 35-year-old man with a beard. Uh, so he comes back in, he changes lickety split, and they get out on the mat and they wrestle. Everybody's looking and waiting for this kind of gangly guy to get squashed, right? To get squeezed, twisted. And all of a sudden, the referee blows the whistle and they get after him. It didn't take but seconds for him to get a hold of this big guy, twist him, push him around, take him to the mat, flip him around, put him on his back, and pin him. When I say seconds, I mean this was maximum 20 seconds, 10, 15-second match where this guy was pinned and they bounce up off the mat. Ref slaps the mat, pinned. Everybody's shocked. The whole place just kind of sucks the air out of the room and goes quiet. Okay. So there's the interesting part. They jump up and the big guy goes, wait a minute, I wasn't ready. You blew the whistle before, and starts making excuses and saying that, oh, I only got beat because he caught me off guard, yada, yada, yada. Woof. Okay. Well, the challenger, the gangly guy who ends up being my head coach, says, that's okay. We can do it again. Oh, okay. And so they shake hands. The referee says, are you ready? Are you ready? Tweet, blows the whistle. And guess what happens again? Same exact scenario, except this time the challenger plays with him a little bit, rolls him around, scores a couple extra points, puts him in a couple extra positions. And after about 30 to 45 seconds of what looks like a cat playing with a mouse, he flips the guy over and pins him. Beep, blows the whistle, taps the mat. He was dominated. The guy puffs his chest, slaps hands instead of shaking hands, and storms off the mat. He had been embarrassed. And the victor gets his hand raised and just kind of, with his gangly gait, walks off the mat. And I'm sitting here wide eyed as a high school student saying, what just happened? Who is that man? How did that situation occur? Well, what happened is this challenger was very humble. See, he was a D1 collegiate wrestler from only 10 years ago. And he had been coaching wrestling teams throughout the country just as a assistant coach because he was passionate about it. His nickname in college, his wrestling nickname, was the Mad Dog. So this guy here was capable of great explosiveness, great skill at the highest level, and he really put this man in his place without ever tooting his own horn, without ever demonstrating anything other than the execution of high level skill. So what happened is we began talking to this, and the interest came to this guy, and he ended up becoming our head coach and led me to a very successful high school career to where I am now able to impart wrestling wisdom and knowledge to the athletes and the students that I train. What was so amazing was the humility. So when I'm talking about humility, he wanted nothing but to show a demonstration and have a man stop being this bold champion, stop intimidating a crowd. He just said somebody needs to effectively quiet this bully up. So one of the things that I really want to emphasize and carry on about leadership here is that in leadership, we have to be humble. We might really have the highest level of skill, the highest level of intelligence, talents, or whatever we have in the room, but we can't just go around beating our chests and challenging everybody and saying, because I said so, I'm the boss, or because I said so, I'm the best, I'm the veteran, I'm the most talented. We have to encourage people. We have to mentor them. We have to lift them up, and we have to stay humble. If you're going to toot your own horn, you're going to get the same reaction that that big guy got. People are going to scoff at you. They're going to hope to watch you fall. But if you use your talents to support others as a servant, you can be humble and a servant, then you're really going to be able to elevate people. Your influence is going to skyrocket. The reason I have this in its first position, this be humble, is because it's something that I have struggled with very much historically in my life, and it shows up every once in a while. But many years ago in my law enforcement career, I had a criminal justice background, a full 4-year degree in criminal justice, which is not normal. Most people get an associate's degree, they get a bachelor's degree, very intelligent law enforcement in the country. But I just happened to have that step up. And I felt the need to really raise my hand, answer every question, make sure that people knew that I understood the law. And in my mindset, it was innocent because I just wanted to prove that I was a competent rookie and that you guys could trust me. But what didn't come across as competence, it came across as arrogance. And it took me a very long time. It took me years to earn that back. So just a couple of weeks or a couple of months of it effectively popping off and saying the right answer or correcting somebody in a scenario or this or that, which again, I wanted to protect people. I wanted to make sure the report got drawn up correctly, or I just want to make sure that accuracy was withheld or not withheld and presented. The tough part is it cost me a lot. It was a very heavy price. So I want to encourage everyone out there to be humble. If you're in an influence position at all, humility will actually amplify influence. And if you do that in an example as bold as the wrestling coach did, or as minuscule as just putting your nose down and getting the work done and doing it right and helping others achieve along the way, either way, your influence, your sphere of influence will grow and it will become more predominant, and people will look to you as their humble leader to take them on to that next adventure, that next challenge, that next area of growth. So I'm going to leave you with that thought as we pivot. And when we come back from the break, we're going to talk about that second category and we're going to dive into it as well. And over time, you're going to be able to see here on the show of Pivotal Change that all 7 principles of leadership will be covered. And then you can take those and implement them in your weak spot or grow your strong spots and make that pivotal change in your life to be a more influential leader. Stay tuned for a final segment, and you're going to enjoy the next topic that we have because it really is going to impact you. Welcome back to our final section of the night. We're going to wrap up this episode with the second topic in the 7 principles of leadership, which is be a passionate visionary. And before the break, be humble was our first category that we talked about. We had a little story, a little demonstration from a wrestling coach on how to properly execute a be humble philosophy and ultimately turned himself into a leader. Well, the next one is be a passionate visionary. And I want to first talk about a little bit about what it is to have a vision. Right? So in order to have a vision, we have to basically see something of ourselves or something in the future. And what I really want everyone to know is that where there is no vision, the people will perish. And if you are in charge of anything, a business, a team, a family, whatever it is, if you don't have a vision for yourself and those people, they will perish. They will ultimately become idle hands. They will become dissatisfied, disgruntled, and they will ultimately perish. That thing will break down, whether it's a business, a team, a softball team, an internal team that drives an entire division of an industry, or if it's your family. You have to have a vision or the people will perish. And that comes from a proverb. So we know that it's true. So one of the things that I want to really get from you is how many of you feel like you're just buried right now? Like, do you really feel like you can just add more to your plate and just keep rocking and rolling and really just drive forward? The average answer that I get, and I won't even say average answer, I want to say the vast majority answer I get is I feel buried, I feel overwhelmed. I don't even have time to think about my vision. Well, your vision has to be something that is actually a predominant focus for you. If you just change your mindset, like we talked at the beginning of the show, to know your value and focus on that vision, that's the art of seeing what is unseen in the future, right? You can do that. You can open up the time, you can open up yourself, and you can accomplish that. Now, I also want to talk about what it is to be passionate. And I'm going to spend some time here in this final segment about being passionate. Think of somebody real quick in your mind that is a really passionate person, or maybe they're not generally passionate, but they're passionate about something. And it could be their favorite food or restaurant, or it could be cars, or it could be some type of collectible, it could be a sport. I've got some friends of mine that are really passionate about pickleball because that has blown up in the country lately, and they are passionate about pickleball. And here's what I'll tell you about that passionate person and their pickleball, right? They're buying or doing their best to buy the very best equipment. They're scheduling time on the court. They're getting themselves into leagues so that they can be challenged and have more exposure. And they're trying to recruit their friends to come play pickleball as well. So a passionate person does various things. If I was just a visionary, if I just had a vision about being an awesome pickleball player, I would play some pickleball. I might read some articles or look at a YouTube, but the other things come with it when I truly become passionate. So I'm gonna hit us right there pretty hard. Okay. So a lot of you realize that you are passionate about your business, but you don't know how to execute on your passion. And that's by drawing people in. So I want to tell you a story. This one, unfortunately, is a negative story about where somebody failed. So I've had a lot of exposure in law enforcement and SWAT with various leaders, literal leaders, as far as command positions, sergeant, lieutenants, captains, assistant chiefs, majors, all kinds of people. And then I've had people that were informal leaders. Maybe it's a peer of mine that just has a skill I don't have. So I have to lean on him to learn and be provided for in this little area. And that's the same in the business world. But one of the SWAT team leaders that I was familiar with led us through a SWAT team, which, by the way, 100% success rate for the over decade that I was on the team. So I'm darn happy with this SWAT team leader overall. I am by no means bad mouthing anyone. But I do want to point that he was a visionary. He had his vision of what this team could be and was going to be, and he was going to get it there. What he lacked is the proper execution of passion. So he had trouble talking to the upper ranks and getting more funding. He had trouble talking to some peers to get allotment of time and these little extra bonuses for training. And he had trouble getting equipment ordered because it had to be done in a certain way in a certain time in a certain protocol with all of the policies and the red tape you got to cut through with government. And a passionate visionary draws other people into their vision. So, yes, he would tell us about it. Yes, we would have an idea of where we want to go, but we were not involved in executing on that passion. Some of us were pretty excited. I was fairly new on the team when this guy was in charge and doing it. What he did is he tried to keep everything to himself. Okay? He tried to keep his vision to himself. There were some trust issues there, and there were some time issues and organization issues there. No human is perfect, and guy was great in many categories. But in this little slice of the pie that I'm talking about today, he failed to draw people into his passion and into his vision. And it ultimately cost him that spot as the team leader as they eventually replaced him with someone else that would execute their passion as a team. So he was great as a team leader tactically and logistically and as far as training and all those things. I mean, he developed some incredibly talented operators and snipers and medics. But the execution of the overall team model failed because he did not draw people back in. He let the organization overwhelm him. If somebody said, "Hey, I'm here to help," and he said, "No, it's okay, I've got it. Hey, I can carry this burden for you. That's okay, I've got it. Hey, I can turn in this stuff and write that report for you. That's okay. I want to type it. I got a couple things I want to say in there." And because he wanted his vision to be perfect, he didn't let his passion draw others in. So I really want to caution people on that. If you don't draw people into your passion or with your passion, if you don't draw them in with your passion, that vision will almost certainly never be accomplished. The next thing that need to do as a passionate visionary is you have to develop a plan of action. If you have no plan of action, your vision will be lost. So once you have the vision, you can see that invisible thing. It does not exist yet. You can see out in the horizon, the 1 year, 3 year, 5 years away. This is what we're going to be when we grow up. We're going to be this vision. You have to put in steps. You have to put in accountability. You have to put in an action plan that you and your calendar and your buddies and your teammates and your supervisors and your subordinates are all going to hold yourselves accountable to. If you don't do that, your passion will dwindle. Okay. Jocko Willink has a great statement literally about a vision without a plan of action is nothing. And I love that so much because it's so eagerly eagerly accepted by people that, yeah, we got to do something about this. Okay. So doing that, one of the key points is optimism in developing a plan. The reason optimism is so important when developing a plan is because you're going to be asking people to change or do something new or different. And do people like change? No, they do not. In fact, people fear change or hate change. But the only thing that we know that is actually consistent in life is change. So if we can get a little bit of our mindset adjusted to the value and creating strategic change, which is towards a vision with an action plan, then we're going to have a really, really good job of getting this accomplished. So your optimism doesn't have to be sunshine and unicorns, right? It doesn't have to be fake. In fact, that disingenuine optimism is really easily picked up by people and they don't like it. And it usually turns them off from wanting to join the vision. But it has to be genuine. Guys, I know this is tough. Guys, I know we got to sprint for a little while. I know we need to get over this hurdle. But after this hurdle, we're going to knock over the next couple of dominoes and life will look like this. It will feel like this. It will be like this. We'll be making more money. We'll have more time off. We'll have smoother processes. We may still be working 40 hours a week, but the hectic chaos will be lower. If we can just get this software implemented, if we can just get these two other big clients right here, we'll have hit our mark. We'll be $1 million or a $10 million company, whatever it is, and we can get there. And if you can draw in how it mutually benefits everyone, that's another way to do it. So with optimism, develop your action plan to recruit people for change to accomplish that vision. Because remember this, if I'm just working harder as, let's just call it a grunt, if I'm just working harder as a grunt to make the boss more money, well, that's not that great of a vision for me. I'm just gonna have to change and do more. I'm gonna get compensated the same, and this guy's gonna, go buy a new Porsche, right? So there's got to be a rising tide raises all ships. There's got to be a benefit for other people as well. And that's a huge part is that if you're passionate and you're a servant and you're humble, you will want everyone to rise with you. One of the things that we say in our offices and on our teams is that when I make more money, you make more money. That's plain and simple, right? It's not when the business makes more money, I make more money. That's foolish. That's really foolish. Do I want to make more money? Yeah, sure. Those green pieces of paper are really nice to have. But the nice thing to have is a non-toxic environment where everybody works together and tries to achieve the same thing every single day and supports each other. And that's what a passionate visionary can truly create and really push forward. So let me get in a little bit of a summary here as we close out our night. Okay. We talked in the beginning about your mindset, about how important it is to see yourself as valuable, your product and your work as valuable, and your team as valuable, and your time as valuable. And then you can start developing yourself in a value-based mindset and pushing yourself forward to that. Then we talked to a wonderful marketing expert who walked us through various steps and strategies on how to organically grow, to do it on a budget, and to understand some triggers of when to change our marketing, because that's going to really take your mindset and your execution of your vision, and it's going to broadcast it to the local city, the local community, the county, the state, the world even. So that marketing is important. And then if you are executing on your leadership and you're being humble, people will rally behind that. They'll be happy to support you as a customer, as a staff member, as a team member, as a third party. If you're coming in here and you're being passionate and visionary, I'm just telling you guys, passion is contagious. And if you are a passionate visionary, the people will be contagious. They will be caught into your vision. They will want to join it. There's a very great movie called 12 O'Clock High about a bomber squadron in World War II and about how the passionate visionary contagious caught on. And he made a quote that says, "When I'm done here, everyone will want to be in the sky." And why that's important is only like 10% of the staff of an airfield actually get on the planes and run missions. The other 90% are all support staff. And we're going to make the 90% jealous, saying they wish they were on the planes in combat in the dangerous scenarios, because I have a vision for how we're going to execute. Everyone's going to want to get on the plane, guys. And that's what you want to do as a passionate visionary. So as we conclude tonight, I want you guys to go out there and see how you can actually put what we discussed tonight into practice. I hope you watch this show and take notes at the same time. And if not, play it back, take notes again. So what I want you to do as a reminder as we sign off, I'm Ryan Conn of Pivotal Change of CS Business Consulting and Shelton Associates CPA, and I'm happy to help anyone here. Feel free to call in, write in the show, leave comments, look us up on Instagram, whatever you need to do, and we'll look at getting you some help. But in the conclusion of the night, I want you to go out there and I want you to see the change and be the change. And we'll be seeing you next time on Pivotal Change.
This has been a Now Media Networks feature presentation. All rights reserved.